right, so we're going to unpack some pretty fascinating stuff you sent me.
Yeah.
About this Ray Dalio interview.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is from the Tucker Carlson show, February 21st, 2025.
Yeah.
So we're pretty recent.
Yeah, Dalio's always thought-provoking.
Yeah, and he doesn't hold back.
No, he doesn't.
He really doesn't. And
yeah, and this one was particularly, I don't know, alarming, I guess is the word that comes to mind, to hear him talk about the state of America and where things are going.
right, and the big kind of takeaway quote that you sent over was that the U.S. is in a type of civil war.
Right, and it's interesting coming from Dalio because he's the billionaire investor. He's not a pundit or anything.
Okay.
He's someone who spent decades
Right.
studying history, financial history, the rise and fall of empires. And so when he uses that term, I think it has a lot of weight.
Absolutely. So let's kind of dig into that a little bit because he paints a pretty stark picture, talking about irreconcilable differences
Right.
and people being willing to fight for the outcomes that they want.
Right.
So, I mean, is this really civil war in the traditional sense? Or are we talking,
Oh, that's the big question.
armies clashing, or is he using this more metaphorically?
I think he's using it more metaphorically in the sense that, historically when we think of civil wars, we think of armed conflict.
Right.
But I think what Dalio is getting at is something maybe a bit more nuanced, but no less concerning, which is this breakdown in societal cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
This inability to even talk to each other anymore.
Right. And a willingness to go maybe not to the extent of violence, but extreme measures to get what we want.
Right. And he even says, quote, "We're probably past the point of being able to resolve that by compromise and empathy."
Wow.
So that's a pretty strong statement.
A bold statement for sure. So it's not necessarily, civil war with armies clashing, but definitely this deep sense of division that he's observing.
Right. And he backs it up with some data too.
Yeah, let's get into that because
He mentions, for example, that the gap between conservative and liberal votes is the widest it's been since 1900.
that's a stark visual.
It is. It's like this country is just, red and blue.
Two completely different Americas.
Yeah.
So why is this happening?
Well, Dalio connects this to some of these bigger forces that have been reshaping the world, things like globalization and technology.
Okay.
And he argues that these forces have disrupted the traditional ways of life. They've created this widening wealth gap.
Right.
And they've fueled these cultural clashes that we see playing out.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, that classic image of the American dream, the
Right.
stable job, the house with the white picket fence.
Right.
Globalization and automation have really shaken that foundation for a lot of people.
They have, and a lot of people feel left behind both economically and culturally.
Right.
And that's really, I think, at the heart of this civil war that Dalio is describing. It's not just that people disagree, it's that they feel like they're living in two completely different realities.
Okay, so we've got this, civil war metaphor playing out this deep sense of division. And then Dalio throws another element into the mix,
Right.
which is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
He sees AI as this potential solution, but also this massive disruptor.
Absolutely. And the scale of disruption that he's talking about is really staggering.
Right.
He compares AI's impact to things like the printing press or the Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
Events that completely reshape societies. But he expresses this concern that no one is really prepared for what's coming.
Yeah, and that's the part that kind of blew my mind, was he said there's really no game plan from governments or tech leaders,
Right.
to deal with the consequences of all this.
And are we just sleepwalking into a technological revolution without really...
I mean, is he being alarmist, or is this really a valid concern?
I think it's a valid concern because on the one hand, the pace of change is so rapid, it's hard to predict exactly what's
Right.
going to happen and what all the implications will be. But on the other hand, his point is we need to be having these conversations now,
Right.
before it's too late, before AI reshapes our world in ways that we might regret.
So it's almost like we're at this crossroads,
I
right?
think so.
We've got this incredible potential with AI, revolutionize healthcare education, how we solve global challenges.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it could make things a lot worse.
Right.
More surveillance, job displacement, even greater societal division.
And it really raises the question of who controls this technology and how do we ensure that it's used ethically and responsibly?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
And, it seems like Dalio is saying that without some thoughtful planning and some proactive measures, AI could end up being more of a curse than a blessing.
Right. It's not a foregone conclusion that this is going to be a positive thing. We have to work to make it a positive thing.
Okay, so we've got the Civil War metaphor, we've got economic anxiety, cultural divides, and now we've got AI entering the scene,
Yeah.
potentially amplifying all of that,
Yeah.
or maybe bridging some of those gaps.
Right.
It's a lot to process, and I think it's important to kind of bring it back to the human element here.
Right.
You know, can AI actually change human nature? Because Dalio doesn't seem to think so.
No, and he really emphasizes that our fundamental needs and desires as human beings, they don't change. You know, we crave connection, we crave belonging, we want to feel like our lives have meaning.
Purpose. Yeah.
And while AI can, reshape the tools and the systems that we use, ultimately it's up to us to decide how we navigate those changes, how we shape the future.
So the real battleground isn't necessarily some physical conflict.
Right.
It's this battle for our values and our priorities and our sense of shared humanity.
Right.
And Dalio asks this very thought-provoking question. He says, can we put harmony and happiness, togetherness? Can we deal with these issues together?
That's a $1 million question, I think.
Yeah, how do we foster that cooperation, that empathy in a world that's increasingly driven by technology?
Yeah.
You know, how do we create a future where AI enhances our lives rather than diminishes our humanity?
Yeah, that's a great place to leave it for now, and we'll pick up on that thread in the next part of this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back.
All right. Yeah, so how do we deal with these issues together, because Dalio's, the Civil War metaphor and the AI revolution, it's pretty daunting stuff.
It is.
But he doesn't just leave us with doom and gloom. He offers some glimpses of hope. And one of the things he really emphasizes is the power of human connection, the importance of community, especially as we navigate these turbulent times.
I mean, that's interesting coming from him. You think of Ray Dalio, you think of, numbers and algorithms.
Right, exactly.
And he's really kind of emphasizing this human element.
Yeah, it's almost like he's saying technology alone can't solve our problems.
Right.
It can amplify our strengths, but it can also amplify our weaknesses.
Right.
And ultimately, it's up to us to decide, what kind of future we want.
So how do we do that? I mean, how do we address these root causes of this civil war? The polarization, the economic disparities, the erosion of trust.
Right.
It just seems like such a massive problem.
It is a massive problem.
Where do we even begin?
Well, Dalio suggests focusing on education.
Okay.
And not just in the traditional sense of, teaching people technical skills.
Right.
But also fostering critical thinking, empathy, a sense of shared responsibility. Imagine a world where education equips people not only to succeed in the job market, but also to engage in thoughtful dialogue.
Right.
To bridge divides, to work collaboratively towards common goals.
That's powerful.
It's about giving people the tools to navigate a world that's becoming increasingly complex and interconnected.
Yeah. I mean, education's a huge part of it.
Right.
But it can't be the only answer.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we also need leadership.
Absolutely. We need effective leadership people who can inspire trust, who can guide us through these challenges.
Yeah, right.
And Dalio emphasizes the need for leaders who can unite people around common goals,
Right.
who can navigate these complex challenges with wisdom and compassion, who can build bridges instead of reinforcing divisions.
Right.
It's about leadership that prioritizes the collective good over personal gain.
So it's not just about, the skills and the knowledge, it's about the values.
Exactly.
And the principles that guide our actions.
Oh, right.
Now, when it comes to AI, it's easy to get caught up in the potential downsides, the job displacement, the risks of misuse.
Right.
But Dalio seems to be somewhat optimistic about its potential for good. So let's talk about that. What are some concrete examples of how AI could help us bridge these divides?
Well, imagine AI analyzing massive amounts of data to optimize resource allocation, to personalize education, to develop new medical treatments.
Okay.
It could revolutionize healthcare education, environmental sustainability. It could address some of the very issues that are driving polarization and conflict.
So instead of replacing human workers, AI could actually augment their capabilities.
Exactly.
Free them up from these tedious tasks, create new opportunities for creativity and innovation.
Right, and that's a much more hopeful outlook.
It is, but then the question becomes, how do we ensure that happens? How do we ensure that AI is developed and deployed ethically and responsibly?
Right. How do we make sure it benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
That's a million-dollar question.
It is, and it's not something that any one person or government or corporation can solve.
Right.
It really requires a global conversation, a collaborative effort involving policymakers, technologists, ethicists, everyday citizens. We need to be proactive in setting ethical guidelines for AI development safeguards against bias and discrimination, mechanisms for accountability and transparency.
I mean, it sounds like we really need to rethink our approach to technology altogether, you know?
I think so.
Move beyond just the hype and the fear and really grapple with these ethical implications.
It's not just about what AI can do, it's about what AI should do.
Right, and who gets to decide?
Exactly.
You know, who benefits from this technology, who's at risk? How do we ensure that AI empowers individuals?
Right.
Rather than eroding their autonomy?
Yeah, those are tough questions, but we have to ask them.
We do, and you know, Dalio even goes so far as to suggest that we might need to rethink our entire economic system. He even mentions the possibility of a universal basic income.
Right.
You know, as a way to provide a safety net for those who are displaced by automation.
It's a radical idea.
It is.
But it highlights the scale of the change that we might be facing.
Yeah.
You know, the traditional models of work and social safety nets, they might not be enough.
Right.
In a world where AI is reshaping the job market, so we need to be thinking about how do we ensure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive, even as technology disrupts traditional industries.
So even though, you know, Dalio paints a pretty stark picture of the challenges that we face, he also offers this path forward. You know, it's about recognizing our shared humanity, investing in education and ethical technology development, fostering a sense of community and purpose.
And it's not about surrendering to fear.
Right.
It's about actively shaping the future that we want to see.
Yeah. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. You know, exploring Ray Dalio's warning about this potential civil war in America.
Right.
The disruptive power of AI.
Yeah.
The need for human connection in the face of all of this. I mean, it's been a roller coaster of ideas, but I feel like I'm starting to see a clearer picture of what a path forward might look like.
Yeah, I think what strikes me about Dalio's perspective is that he's not offering these, you know, simplistic solutions or pretending there's an easy fix.
Yeah.
He's really acknowledging the complexity of the issues. And instead of, you know, giving us a roadmap, he's kind of giving us a compass and urging us to navigate this uncharted territory with, you know, wisdom and courage.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You know, he's not sugarcoating things.
Right.
He's saying, hey, this is messy.
Right.
This is complicated. But we have the power to shape the future.
We do.
If we work together.
If we work together. And I think that emphasis on community, on shared purpose keeps coming up.
It does. It does.
It's like he's saying technology can connect us globally.
Right.
But it can also isolate us individually.
Right.
So we need to consciously choose how we use these tools, you know, building bridges rather than walls, fostering empathy instead of division.
Yeah, and his research backs that up. You know, you mentioned this Global Powers Index.
Right.
Ranking countries based on power and health and happiness.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, beyond just basic needs like, you know, food and shelter, the thing that was most closely linked to happiness was a sense of community.
Wow.
You know, strong social connections, a sense of belonging, shared experiences.
Yeah.
Those are the real keys to well-being, it seems.
So maybe the answer to this, you know, civil war isn't about political battles or technological innovations.
Right.
Maybe it's about something much more fundamental.
It's about those human connections.
Strengthening our human connections.
Yes.
It's about fostering a sense of belonging, rediscovering the value of shared experiences, and remembering that we're all in this together.
And I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
We do.
You know, in this world that's so focused on, you know, individual achievement and competition.
Right.
But ultimately, we're social creatures.
We are.
We need each other.
And what brings us joy and fulfillment?
It's those connections.
Spending time with loved ones, engaging in meaningful work, contributing to something larger than ourselves.
Those are the building blocks of strong communities.
And I feel like that's more important now than ever.
Absolutely.
As we face all these potential upheavals of the AI age.
Yeah, if we can focus on nurturing those human bonds, prioritizing empathy and compassion, rediscovering the power of collective action, maybe the solutions to these other challenges, the technological challenges, the economic disparities, the political divisions.
They'll start to emerge more organically.
Right. It's not about conquering some external enemy or mastering some complex technology.
Yeah.
It's about nurturing the best aspects of our own humanity.
Wow. So this deep dive has definitely left me with a lot more questions than answers.
It always does.
It does. It does. But I also feel this renewed sense of possibility. You know?
Me too.
We've explored some pretty intense issues, but ultimately it comes down to the choices we make.
The choices we make.
Both individually and collectively.
Yeah.
What kind of world do we want to create?
What are we willing to do to make that world a reality?
Yeah. And Dalio leaves us with this one final question.
Yeah.
He says, can we put harmony and happiness togetherness? Can we deal with these issues together?
And I think that's a challenge worth embracing.
It is.
Because the future, it's unwritten.
It is.
And it's up to each of us to decide what kind of story we want to tell.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure as always.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.